Okay, I wanted to show you guys some different transitions you might use in your animation. And again, as with some of the other videos I've been making for characters, I recommend making your backgrounds, especially if you plan on zooming out or panning or have a character walk through your background, make it larger than our animation size. So this one was made 4 times our animation size in both directions. And I made it on a bunch of different layers and I grouped it, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is just select the whole group, drag this tab out of Photoshop, and use my move tool to drag it into one of my animation spaces. You'll see it looks really large because it's 4 times the size. Let me say Command minus or Control minus if you're on a PC, so I can just zoom out. And I'm going to free transform this. Oh, I still have to zoom out just a little bit so that it's holding Option 2. So Option and Shift, free transform it just so I can see a little bit more. And then I'll just move it to wherever I want this thing to go. Okay, so maybe I start it here, or maybe I start in the leaves of this tree. Maybe there'll be a bird or something there. Let's do that. Let's pretend there's a bird in the tree right here. Okay, and I'll go ahead and look at this a little closer. Okay, so it might have been obvious to you just from me sizing this that if I want to zoom out now, I have plenty of background to zoom out from. I can also, you'll see, just move, right? If I had a, oop, I gotta keep it up there. If I had a character, like let's say I have a bird starting in this tree, they could start right here and I could have them fly over here. And I have plenty of background for them to do that. So we'll pretend we have a bird here. We're zoomed in, and I'll just go ahead and make the frames from the background like before. So this will be my first frame, and I'll say Command Option Shift E to stamp visible, and Control Option Shift E if you're on a PC. Take the visibility off, just highlight that background layer again, and we'll start zooming out. So free transform, Command T or Control T on a PC, and I'm gonna go ahead and hold Option and Shift, and this will help me start to zoom out. Let me see. Okay, and press return. If I want to move it at all too, I can do that at the same time. Now I guess I have to make sure that my sky is up here. Okay, so I'm starting to zoom out and kind of reposition this a little bit. Make a new frame. Free transform. And go ahead and move this over. So we're going to pretend I have a bird in the tree, or I'm just looking at this background before something happens, whatever. Right, so I can see kind of where it was before. If I look at layer 2, okay, so that's looking pretty good. Make a new frame, take the visibility off, make the background active. So you get the idea, right? So I have a ways that I can sort of zoom out and pan over. And I could also, like I said, I could be just moving it left to right if this bird had to fly to the right. So I just move the whole background. Let's see. Okay, that looks pretty good. Make my new frame, take the visibility off, transform the background. Okay, that looks good. Make a new frame, take the visibility off, make the background active. So you can see there's a lot of repetition in this process. Okay, so I'll make my last frame here. Okay, so if I turn these all on, you'll see it's frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I want to zoom back in, it's just the opposite of that, right? So what I would do is I would choose an area to zoom in on, and as long as it doesn't get larger than my original size I created it at, since these are smart objects, it should be fine in terms of quality. So I'll start zooming in now. Maybe I'll try to zoom in a little towards this other tree. Okay, so we'll just say Command T, and I'll pull and hold Shift from this corner. So start to zoom in towards this tree. Got to kind of leave it near the top because of the sky. Okay, so we're zooming in, make a frame, turn it off, make it active, zoom in. Looking good. So you see I always kind of check how it looks between frames too before I make this new one. Make the background active. Free transform. Oh, let's see, just shift. And maybe this fade in the distance starts to grow less, so I'll just make it less opaque with these as we start zooming in a little more. So it goes like that and like that. Make a new frame. And make the fade even less. So you're going to want to change everything that you want to completely change in the frame before making a frame. So ideally I'd have my characters and everything in here. I'm just kind of showing you transitions in this video though. So before, after that one, make a frame. Okay, so you guys, hopefully you get it. So we did zooming out, zooming in. If you needed to pan, of course, you just move the background left to right. And as long as you have background there, it'll look fine. And kind of same thing if I had a character walking. I could actually have them just walking mostly in the center, moving their legs, and just moving the background will give the impression of them moving. If you need a longer background, like I ran out of sky and ground here, one kind of cool thing that you can do is you can select all these layers. So this whole background actually, and I could copy it, say Command J, or you could duplicate the group, and you could edit, transform, flip horizontal, and just move it to the left and match it up. And I'd probably get rid of this background tree, or I would move it. Let's see. Make sure I select the right one. And then I have an even longer background that I could pan through. So I could just select both of these now, and you can see, boom, really long background. So there's some tips for zooming and panning and making a background that a character can move through. In terms of fading, what you would do, here I'll show you how to even make that perhaps out of the timeline. So if you didn't make it in your initial frames and I later decide I want to fade while these are going on, let's go ahead and make a frame animation, and we'll make our frames from layers like we've gotten used to doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all these layers that are not frames, or sorry, get rid of all the frames that are not layers. So the first one selected, hold shift, click on the last one. So these are just those layers that are making up the imagery that I don't want as actual frames. Say delete, yes. So here's my actual frames. Okay, so that's kind of the effect I've got going right now. Select them all, so I'll slow down the duration to maybe 0.2 seconds a frame. Nope, maybe I want even slower. Let's try 0.3. And if I want to reverse the order, go under these options, say reverse frames. So this will be sort of the intended order. Okay, and now let's say I got here and I could either have this start fading somewhere in here, or maybe I fade to black here. What I could do is go ahead and have this last frame active, duplicate it through the timeline. So this little button that looks like a page flipping over, click on it. And now, see the layer that's visible? I actually am going to add a layer over that will be visible. So I'll say new layer, and I'm going to fill it with black. Don't freak out, this will probably change a bunch of your layers, or a bunch of your frames at first. So use the paint bucket, fill it with black, and we'll just start lowering the opacity a lot. So it's just starting to gain some opacity. Now you'll see it's only did that on that frame, on frame 11, because that layer is over it. It's showing as completely black. So I need to make that active and just take the eyeball off it in frame 11. You'll see in frame 12 it's still visible, right? Maybe duplicate the frame and make that layer more opaque. Duplicate the frame, make that layer more opaque, duplicate the frame, make that layer more opaque, etc., etc., until you get all the way to black. Okay, so here's what we have. Now if I wanted to fade this before it stopped, I could do it a little bit different. Okay, I would actually start my fade, somewhere else. Let's say I want it to start fading at frame 6 and still have the imagery moving. Okay, so I think that this is where I started my fade. initially, so let me delete those frames. Okay, and I'm going to just move this layer to the top of all my frames. Okay, and I'll go ahead and select 1 through 5 and make it invisible. And then on frame 6, we'll start it at, real low percentage. 7, we'll make it a little bit higher percentage. 8, say, so you see I'm just keeping the same layer visible over all these. I'm just changing the opacity. And so when you're working with editing existing frames, you can always change what's visible within that frame. So you need to click on the frame and then in the layers palette change what's visible. You can change the opacity of what's visible or the location of what's visible, I believe, without necessarily messing with other frames. You might have to go back once in a while and, like I did, and just make sure it's not visible on earlier versions or something. But that's one way to work in the timeline. One thing I believe is kind of difficult is if you want to transform objects. I think it will transform in your other frames. So it's better to, if this was a shape that I had that I wanted to show in these frames and I wanted it to get larger or something, it's better to copy the shape and just make the copies that are larger visible with each frame. Okay, so here we're zooming and fading. I think in another lesson we did something where we did sort of a cartoony effect, like Looney Tunes, where the circle gets smaller and smaller. So that's what I'm talking about. You'll have difficulty doing it from the timeline alone. So here's what you want to do in that case. Let's say again, we're going to start from 6. Okay, so I just took the visibility of that fade off of all the layers. I'll go ahead and make a new layer, and we'll do the Looney Tunes sort of circle close effect. Okay, so we've got a circle, and we want it set on new layer for now. Okay, and we're going to maybe try to start somewhere near the center and say Shift and Option after you get going, and make it bigger than the whole thing. Okay, don't worry, I know it's showing over everything right now. We will change that. Now, in your properties over here that pop up, make it subtract from. It's this kind of subtract front shape. Okay, and what we're going to do is transform it for the first time we see it so that it's just barely in the image. So I'm going to hold Shift and Option and just have it just barely in the image. Okay, and say return, and you'll see it's just barely in all the images right now. So 5 through 1, I'm going to take the visibility of it off. But now, instead of making this visible over 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because I don't think it's going to work very well, if I just transform it, I'll try. Let's see, Shift and Option. Right, but I think it's going to affect 6 when I do this. It did, right? So what I'm going to do instead is I'll copy it, say Command J or Layer, Duplicate Layer, and for 7, I'm going to take the visibility off of ellipse 1, and I will just have this ellipse on, free transform, move it in a bit, say return, and I have to take the visibility of that ellipse off all the ones before it. Okay, so what we should have is 5, no ellipse, 6, starting, 7, it's going in more. Okay, for 8, go ahead and copy that one, and we will transform it. Shift and Option, zooming in, return all the frames before it, take the visibility off that new ellipse. So it should be 4 nothing, 5 nothing, 6, 7, 8. So you can kind of see how this is working. 9. So I'll just copy that ellipse again, transform it, return, take the visibility off all the layers before that. Number 9, copy that ellipse, transform it, take the visibility of the new ellipse off all the frames that are before. So you're just changing what's visible, basically. I think you can still move the objects between frames, but if you transform them, it really messes with your other versions of it when you're trying to transition like this. That was kind of a big jump, but anyway. I was trying to hurry, I guess. That's okay. You want your action to be maybe a little smoother than mine will be, but that's okay. Okay. 10. Last one. And then after this I might have to copy frames if I don't get this ellipse small enough, so. Oop, hold Option 2. Okay, take the visibility off of all the previous frames for this new ellipse. Oh, it's starting to look like the Earth, kind of. So here's what we have so far. And if I needed to do more, I could copy the layer, or copy the frame, and then on this one, go ahead, make another version of the ellipse, transform it, make it even smaller. These are kind of big jumps, but take the visibility off all those earlier ones. There you go. Wow, that's kind of cool. It actually sort of almost looks like the Earth once that circle starts coming in. Okay, hopefully this helps you with all your transitions.